Hello and welcome to Tyrock 2000. This has been a spectacular year of games for me, new and old. All in all, I was able to beat 62 of them, and I want to tell you about each. Which ones were great? Which ones sucked? Which was my game of the year? I'm going to let you know. The majority of the games I'll be talking about will have no spoilers. But if I'm going to mention story spoilers, do not worry, I will give you plenty of notice. Seriously, don't worry, you will not get a spoiler. So sit back and relax, or fire up your lawnmower, or start washing the dishes, whatever you do when you're listening to a podcast. Let's get into it, Game Sharks. Signalis. So I started off the year with this one, and I could not have been happier. It's an indie horror game with nostalgic graphics. It looks like a Sega Saturn game, or maybe even an early PlayStation 1 game. So I love the way it looks. It's great music, dystopian, cyberpunky, futuristic setting, which I also love. It's got a great weapon selection. Your pistol's a CZ75, which is cool. Your revolver Magnum is a Chiappa Rhino, which I've never seen in a horror game before. And really, it's not in a lot of games in general, so that was a cool pick. The shotgun looks like a SPAS 12. It looks good. The monsters, they're obviously Silent Hill inspired, and they look good. I like the idea of them being infected androids. It's kind of a neat concept. And Signalis even brings back the body burning mechanic from Resident Evil Remake. So overall, this game was awesome. I bought a physical copy on the Switch because I liked it so much. I beat it twice. Highly recommend Signalis. Daymare, 1998. This game is exciting because it's an indie clone of the Resident Evil 2 remake style of gameplay. So third-person shooting, but slower paced, fighting zombies and monsters. And overall, it was good. It has a reloading mechanic that's kind of Tarkov style, where you can either do a fast reload or a slow reload and retain your magazines in your inventory, which I thought was very cool. Overall, I enjoyed the vast majority of the game. I thought it was very good. For some reason, the last boss has 1,000,000 HP, which made me so mad I wanted to break my keyboard in half. In fact, if I was giving numerical values to how good these games are, that last boss was so infuriating, I would knock 3 points off the score of Daymare. So I guess play the game up until the last boss, and then just turn it off, and you would have had an excellent time. So overall, it was good. The puzzles were good. And I thought the characters were good. The first guy you play as is an absolute scumbag, and I thought that was really cool. A lot of video games you don't get to play as actually evil people. And his voice actor was Rick from Robot Co-op. I love Robot Co-op, so I enjoyed that too. Overall, Daymare was a good time. Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity. Straight up, this is the best Musou game I've ever played. That's a Dynasty Warriors style game if you're not in the know. And I have played every Dynasty Warriors game on the PS2. Played Hyrule Warriors 1. I played some of the Fire Emblem 1. And Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is the king for me. The gameplay is great. The levels are great. The weapons are great. The story is great. It is an excellent game. If you have a Switch and you don't have this game, you're doing it wrong. I loved it. Castlevania Curse of Darkness. So this was the second 3D Castlevania game on the PS2. And overall, it was good. The gameplay was fun, hack and slash style. Good variety of weapons. It had this devil system where you could equip different devils to do special moves, which was fun. The music was great. I mean, it's Castlevania. If a Castlevania game didn't have great music, it would be a serious problem. The levels were mostly just hallways, so they weren't amazing. They were just okay, and the graphics were pretty terrible for a PS2 game. It looks kind of like a mid-level Dreamcast game, in my opinion. The graphics are pretty horrible, but the game runs smooth. It's one of the few old Castlevania games that I hadn't beat, so I was happy to play it. I would recommend playing it. It's decent overall. Live Alive, specifically the remake on the Switch. I cannot stress enough that this game is a classic Squaresoft masterpiece. The music is incredible. Look up Megalomania specifically, and I dare you not to get pumped listening to that music. If you want to run as fast as you ever have on a treadmill, listen to Megalomania from Live Alive. But aside from that, it has an extremely unique campaign where you play as different characters in different periods of time. And I know what you're thinking. It's like, oh, I played Chrono Trigger. I know what that's about. No, it is not like Live Alive. Chrono Trigger and Live Alive, the concepts sound similar on paper, but they are nothing alike. Live Alive, every character you play as, it's a completely different scenario. Oftentimes it has completely unique mechanics and a unique feel with each character. And they are so incredibly creative. From the far future where you're playing as this cute little robot dude, where that scenario is almost like survival horror. It's like creepy and dark, where you're trying to escape from this monster, to the cowboy scenario, where you have a time limit to set up defenses in a town where this band of bandits are going to ransack the town, and you get to choose where the townspeople are going to set up their defenses and what kind of traps you're going to spring on the bandits when they roll through. And oh my gosh, it is amazing. The story is terrific, and how they set up the ultimate villain for the game is unlike no other game I've played, and it is criminal that Live Alive story is not spoken about. As a matter of fact, I'm going to allude to how the villain is set up, and if you are ever going to play this game, please do not listen to this. Mute me and skip ahead. The next game I'm going to talk about is The Evil Within 2, so when you see the art for Evil Within 2, you'll know that you're out of spoilers territory. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to mute me. I do not want to spoil this for anybody. Okay, cool. So after you play as all the different characters, there's an extra scenario that opens up, and it is a knight in medieval times. And you play as this knight, and at the beginning of the game, everything is set up to... his life's going great. He's got his best friend, and everything is wonderful for him. And as you play as the knight, slowly his fortunes begin to turn, and he keeps having worse and worse luck, and more terrible things happen to him. And at the very end of his scenario, he gives in to his despair, and he becomes the villain of the entire game that you've been fighting with all the other characters. The reveal is that the knight is actually the demon that you've been fighting through time with all the other characters. And then another scenario opens up where the characters you played as through time, you assemble them in the medieval kingdom, and you go and you slay this demon that was the knight you played as, and it is awesome. If you're a fan of JRPGs, you have to play this game. Please play this game. Live Alive is a golden classic. The Evil Within 2. So this is a game that I tried to play 2 years ago, and it just did not hook me. But this year, I decided to come back to it and try it again, and I ended up thoroughly enjoying my playthrough. I like how it's a mini sandbox kind of world where you can stealth around and explore and find extra items and ammo and upgrade your gear. The gameplay feels great. The entire game can be played in first person, which makes it feel completely different, and it is really, really immersive and fun. The bosses looked really good. The story makes no sense to me. I know, whatever, I'm not big-brained enough. I went to public school, I don't know, say whatever you want, but I think the story is presented in a really mediocre way, and it's unfollowable, and eventually I just kind of stopped caring about it and just enjoyed the great levels, the awesome gameplay. I highly, highly recommend that you play this game if you enjoy survival horror. Highly recommend The Evil Within 2. Silent Hill 4. So there seems to be a little bit of a resurgence of nostalgia for this game, and I don't understand it in the slightest. This game absolutely sucks. You go through, the first 4 worlds, and then you have to do them again while you're being chased by Walter, and it is so unfun, it's not even funny. Oh my gosh, I hate this game. I hate Silent Hill 4 so much. It just feels like absolute trash to play. I do understand that the first person creepy apartment, I understand why people like that, and as a matter of fact, I love that. I think that is a very cool idea. Exploring the apartment while it gets worse and worse when you go from level to level. That's terrific. Team Silent. They nailed it. It's a great idea. The levels suck. The water prison. The beginning of the water prison is awesome. You're going from room to room. You fight those horrifying baby enemies. My god, they are so scary. But then you go back and Walter's chasing you and you got to go up and down the dang rooms and you're escorting that chick in the arm cast, Eileen. I think maybe her name was. I don't remember. It's no fun. It sucks. I hate it. I'll never, ever fire it up again. I've beat Silent Hill 2 probably 10 times. I've beat Silent Hill 3 at least 10 times. I've beat Silent Hill 1 a couple times. I will never, ever touch Silent Hill 4 as long as I live, and you can hold me to that. Dread Templar. So this game is within the boomer shooter genre, so it's a new shooter, but made in a classic style. Kind of plays like Quake, and it's very good. Really great weapon selection, some creative weapons. You get like a katana you can throw that's really fun to use. And another unique thing that sets this game apart is you can slot like abilities into your character, and you can like create a build for your character depending on how you like to play. If I remember correctly, I think I upgraded my shotgun a lot, and I like tightened its spread where it had really good range, and I was just pump shotgunning through most of the game, just goring demons, and it was a blast. A very, very good boomer shooter. I recommend. Dying Light 2. I had very high expectations for this game. It was in development for seemingly forever. I love Dying Light 1. Dying Light 1 is so fun to explore. The combat's amazing. The zombies are terrific. That game is great. Dying Light 2, on the other hand, was a complete disappointment. It has a much higher emphasis on fighting regular humans, which is totally lame and not nearly as fun as fighting zombies. Yeah, the story wasn't very compelling. It's not a terrible game, but if you were thinking about playing it because you liked the first one, I would say just replay the first one. I wouldn't even play number 2. Project Downfall. This is a really unique game. Imagine Hotline Miami, but first person, with absolute trippy, like your like main character is drug addled, and you're fighting like the Russian mob, and you're just gore them with shotguns, and the environments are like somewhat destructible. The combat is intense. You die super fast, but the enemies also die very quickly. And just zipping through levels, like blasting chunks out of them. They look like sprites. It has like a retro kind of appearance to it, but you can still blast chunks out of their sprites. And it's just tremendously satisfying to play. The atmosphere is also terrific. Very unique, really gritty and dark, but it's slightly, it's somewhat futuristic, like neon-soaked cityscapes, nightclubs. terrific game. I highly recommend that you try it out. If you're a fan of Hotline Miami, or a fan of, well, mainly if you're a fan of Hotline Miami, just imagine it in first person, and that is Project Downfall. It's great. Shadow Hearts Covenant. So this is an RPG on the PS2. It's the second in the Shadow Hearts series. Third, if you count Kodelka, the progenitor of the Shadow Hearts series on the PS1. And it's a very unique RPG. There are real historical characters in it, like Rasputin, the Russian Romanov family, and it takes place in the real world during that time period, which is very unique for a JRPG. It is mostly voice acted, and the voice acting is good. There's really nothing like it. Really, really unique characters, really strange weapons. One character, he's this vampire wrestling strongman, and he just uses large, heavy objects are his weapons, like a telephone box. I think he gets a pillar eventually, just to smash enemies with. So yeah, it's a very odd game. It's a type of game that could only really come out during the PS2 era. Or I guess a game like that could come out during the PS1 era. What I mean is after the PS2 era, PS3, 360, that kind of era, and moving into modern times with gaming, fun, goofy, weird games have become less and less. So it's cool to go back and play a game that's strange like this. Out of the series, my favorite is the very original Kodelka on the PS1, but Covenant is good. I would definitely say play Kodelka and play the first Shadow Hearts, and if you really need some more, play Covenant. But my recommendation would be for Kodelka and the first Shadow Hearts, mainly. This one is a maybe, if you're just looking for a JRPG on the PS2 you haven't played yet. Rad Racer on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. This was the first game on the NES from a publisher you might have heard of, Squaresoft, possibly, before they were skyrocketed into mega popularity with Final Fantasy. They made Rad Racer. And Rad Racer is an arcade-style racing game, and for a game so old, the NES, it plays great. Controls are responsive. The graphics look good. If you take into account how old the game is, the stylized, colorful graphics still look great. I mean, this is my first time playing this game, and I enjoyed it very much. Sonic Team Racing. So this is a kart racer, and you play as the guys from the Sonic games, and it is really fun. You have different teams that race simultaneously. Like you're not racing by yourself. You, like the title would suggest, it's Sonic Team Racing. So if you pick Sonic, you have Tails and Knuckles as your buddies while you're racing, and you can toss your power-ups to each other. You can give each other boosts. You can use one of your buddies, their slipstream, to charge a turbo for you to get a speed boost. It's an extremely fun game, and I've actually played it more than I played Mario Kart on the Switch. Which one is that? Mario Kart 7 is on the Switch? I don't know. Anyway, whatever Mario Kart's on the Switch, I played Sonic Team Racing more than that. And that might reduce your opinion of me. And, that's all right. That's all right. I shamelessly love Sonic Team Racing. Highly recommend. Duke Nukem 0 Hour. So this is one of the third-person Duke Nukem shooter games. This one was on the Nintendo 64, and I can wholeheartedly say that if I would have played this for the first time as a kid, it would be in my top 10 games of all time, if I had nostalgia for it. This game is amazing. The shooting feels great, the movement feels great, the levels are great, the weapons are great. You go through different periods of time and Duke's outfits change. The way his armor looks changes. It is awesome. I would say confidently that this is one of the best games on the Nintendo 64. And I would do just about anything to get a modern remaster of this game. This is my first year playing this game. This is my first time playing this game, and I already love it this much. I love it. I love it. It's amazing. Play it. Highly recommend. Duke Nukem 0 Hour. One of the greats. Crusin USA, specifically on the Nintendo 64. I got on a Nintendo 64 racing kick about a month or two into the year, and this was the first game that I played, and it's good. Arcade-style racing game, very, very straightforward. Press the gas, avoid your racing competition, and hopefully get in first place. It's good if you want some nostalgia. The N64 generation of racing games. You'll be satisfied. Mickey Speedway USA. So as the name would suggest, this is a kart racing game on the Nintendo 64 in the same vein as Diddy Kong Racing or Mario Kart. It's not as good as Diddy Kong Racing or Mario Kart, but if you need some more kart racing in your life, you'll be satisfied. Graphics look good, controls feel good, the levels are good. Overall, it's good. Crusin Exotica. So this is another cruising game in the cruising series on the Nintendo 64. Arcade style racing. More of the same if you played Crusin USA. If you want some nostalgic arcade action, fire it up. If you don't, you can skip it. You're not missing much. It was decent. Crusin World on the Nintendo 64. Guess what? It's more of the same arcade racing, cruising stuff. If you want an arcade experience, fire it up. If you don't, skip it. Don't worry about it. Top Gear Rally on the Nintendo 64. So this is a rally game, meaning you're going to be mostly on dirt tracks, shifting gears, power sliding around turns, and it is very good. It's got great looking graphics for a Nintendo 64 game. The controls are responsive. When you beat the game, you unlock a milk truck, and instead of having a speedometer, it's a milk bottle, which is really amusing to me. And overall, Top Gear Rally is a great game. You can customize the paint on your cars also, which I love. I would recommend this. I really would. If you played all the Colin McRae games and you want another old school rally game, throw in Top Gear Rally. You're gonna have a great time. Beetle Adventure Racing on the N64. This is a great racing game. So it seems like a strange concept for a racing game where you can only play as Beetles. But I think because of that, the developers were able to be very, very creative. The levels are extremely detailed. The graphics, they almost look like an early next generation game. They look like an early Dreamcast game, but it's on the N64. The graphics are terrific. I mean, look up some gameplay if you don't have an emulator or you don't have a physical copy and see this game running. It looks awesome. The levels are long. They're very detailed. You get to do these crazy jumps, and you have to find creative ways through the level to locate tokens, if I remember correctly, to unlock the next set of levels. And it's just a really terrific game. Highly recommend Beetle Adventure Racing. Resident Evil 4 Remake. One of my most anticipated games of the year, and I was not disappointed in the slightest. Capcom took one of the greatest games ever, Resident Evil 4, and was able to manage to remake it, create their own flavor for the remake where it doesn't overshadow the original in any way, but it creates a new experience that is still faithful in spirit to the original. A new experience it's way creepier. Like the cult, they're actually, like, you see that they abduct people and horrifically murder them. And Capcom did a really nice job distinguishing it from the original. They made some really brilliant gameplay decisions that just really, as a longtime Resident Evil fan, made me smile. For instance, in the original game, Leon's infected, of course, but that never is impacted, never impacts the gameplay in any way. It's just in cutscenes. But in the remake, the red Illuminados leadership monsters can actually tap into the Plagueis that's in Leon's body and stun him. And I thought that was a really, really cool thing that Capcom did, kind of melding story and gameplay into the game. Aside from that, the weapon selection is terrific, just like the original. The weapons feel incredible. The Riot shotgun, the Benelli M3 Super 90 in this game, is, in my opinion, the greatest shotgun Capcom has ever made for a Resident Evil game. It feels like an absolute cannon. It has great range, and it is so unbelievably fun to just remove limbs from monsters with it. This game is another benchmark in quality remakes from Capcom. They are the kings of remaking games. They are the undisputed champions, and Resident Evil 4 Remake is an amazing game. It's an all-time great, and I absolutely love it. I've beat it. I mean, it came out this year. I've already beat it 6 times. I play it constantly. I love it. Offroad Challenge 64. So this is another arcade-style racing game on the N64, but it has a dune buggy-style off-road appearance to it. Plays a lot like Crusin USA, but it's got good-looking graphics. I really like the way the different cars look. They did a nice job with the models of them. Controls are responsive. It's good. I would recommend this game over the Crusin games, but I would say only fire it up if you just really need a retro arcade-style racing experience. Other than that, you can just skip it. Quest 64, an infamous game. An RPG on the Nintendo 64 that gets a lot of hate. It's actually it's more of like a meme game, really. But I will say that I actually enjoyed my time with it. I like that you level up individually the different elements. You can kind of like spec your character how you want to progress depending on which elements you decide to level up. The magic attacks look really good. It's an early N64 game, but it has really colorful graphics. The dungeons look good. I like how the different spells, what you should use in your situation is dependent on the terrain that you're in. Like I remember there was a meteor spell that I was fighting on the side of a cliff, and a lot of my meteors were actually missing. Like it wasn't an invisible wall in combat. My meteor spell was actually, they were missing my enemy because they were next to the edge of the cliff, and I thought that was really cool, especially for a game of its time period. And overall, I actually really enjoyed it. I think it's a great game. And if you're an RPG fan, chances are you haven't played Quest 64 because of its reputation. And I would say change that. Play Quest 64. It's actually really fun. That's a recommend. Top Gear Rally 2 on the N64. This game, I was not expecting it to be how it was. And I mean that as a compliment. It is not arcade style like Offroad. And it's not like Top Gear Rally 1. And what I mean by that is it is a simulator style game. You got to worry about the heat on your tires. You have to worry about your suspension. You have to worry about your radiator. Your parts break while you're racing. You have to pick the right tires for the level that you're about to race in. It's really cool. And it's far advanced for being a Nintendo 64 game. I'll caution you that it has a huge learning curve. When I first started playing, I was using the wrong tires for the terrain I was on, and my car was only going like 15 miles an hour, and my tires were exploding. And I was very frustrated, like, what is wrong with this game? And I had to do a lot of playing around to get the right type of tires for the terrain I was on. But once I figured that out, and I got the hang of the learning curve of the game, It was a really enjoyable simulation experience. If you go into it with the right expectations, you will enjoy. I recommend it. Rush Extreme Racing. Another Nintendo 64 racing game. This one is unique in the fact that the levels are cities that you're racing through, and they're somewhat you can like pick your own route through the city. It's kind of like Midnight Club way before Midnight Club was a thing, like a really dumbed down version of Midnight Club, but it's cool to see an N64 game like this. You know, you're dropped in the city, the race starts, there are a lot of cars in the race, which is another cool thing. It's like you and 20 other cars, and you're making your way up, down, through the different streets. You could drive through some of the buildings, and you're trying to figure out the best path from point to win. And it's really fun. It's unique. It's a great game. I'd recommend. Death by Degrees. This is a really odd game. You're playing as Nina Williams from Tekken, who is a pretty popular or well-known fighting game character. But it's a beat-em-up game where you use the analog stick to aim your attacks, which is definitely a relic of the PS2 era. There were a couple beat-em-up games like this, and you know, it was a thing that they tried to make it a thing. It didn't really catch on. But anyway, that's cool. You know, it's unique. The level progression is kind of Resident Evil style, or kind of like, well, like Metal Gear Solid Resident Evil-ish. You're like on a boat and you go from area to area, you find key items, you actually like complete puzzles, you use key items to progress your way through the game. And it starts off strong. The boat, the beginning of the game, is actually very cool. But once you get to about halfway through the game, the bosses have like massive health pools, and they're really, really annoying to fight. And it kind of goes downhill once you're halfway through. So overall, I would not recommend this game, but if you're curious, pull up some gameplay. It's a relic of its time. Soul of the Samurai. I'm sure you've heard of the game Onimusha. Well known. Great game. Resident Evil style game in ancient Japan on the PS2. Onimusha's awesome. As a matter of fact, I'm probably going to do a video on it sometime next year. Well, you'd be shocked to know that there was a Resident Evil style tank control samurai game on the PS1, and that is Soul of the Samurai. And it's actually a really good game. I haven't really heard of people talking about this game. It's a weird, obscure game. The only reason I know about it is when I was in high school, one of my buddies bought a copy of it randomly at some game store and let me try it. I hadn't beat it until this year, so you know, it took me almost 20 years to finally beat it. You know, finally sit down and play through it. It's not particularly long, but it's really fun. The combat is detailed. There's blocking. There's actually a counter system that's really fun to use. You get a nice variety of weapons. You can play through the game as a man or a woman, and they have different combat styles, and it's terrific. I would really, really recommend this game. It's not very well known, but if you get the opportunity to try out Soul of the Samurai, definitely do so. Extreme G, XG3. This is a futuristic racing game on the PS2. It's the third game in the Extreme G series that started on the N64, and it's extremely fun. Your motorcycles that you're racing, they look like the motorcycle from Akira. They have a really cool futuristic appearance. They move very fast, so it's a really high-speed game. Think F-Zero, the speed. The frame rate is silky smooth. The controls feel great. It's just a fun, fast-paced, futuristic racing game. If you've played Wipeout, if you played all the Wipeout games and you just need something more, throw in Extreme G3 on the PS2. You will not be disappointed. I highly recommend. Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy. Out of all of the lightsaber Star Wars games, I do not think this one has ever been topped. The combat feels great. It is intense. You can choose your path, what lightsaber styles you want to use as you progress, which is really fun. The levels are great, and the game gives you choice on your path through it, which levels you want to tackle at what time. Great progression, great levels, shooting feels good, lightsaber combat's the best. It's just an overall terrific game. Even if you're not into Star Wars, which I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, I'll occasionally rewatch The Empire Strikes Back like once every 3 years. Even if you're not a big Star Wars fan, this game is extremely fun. Highly recommend. Duke Nukem Land of the Babes. Another third-person Duke Nukem shooter game. It's not nearly as good as 0 Hour, but it's still really fun. And particularly, and this is going to sound weird, particularly there's a couple fully underwater levels. I know, underwater levels on PS1 era usually aren't very good. But in this game, I think they're the best in the game. It's just, I don't know, it's just really fun to explore. It's like a sunken city, but you're Duke and you're rebreather, you're like scuba gear, and you're fighting sharks and you're swimming around, and it's great. I would recommend this game for sure. Covert Ops Nuclear Dawn. This is a very unique PlayStation 1 game. It has fixed camera angles and tank controls like Resident Evil, but it's a espionage style game like Metal Gear Solid, and it takes place on this massive futuristic train that's speeding down tracks. There is no game like it. The gameplay is really cool. The setting is completely unique. It is awesome. It's a hidden gem on the PS1. Don't at me, Metal Jesus. Don't even think about adding me on this one. It's great. Highly recommend. Warhammer Bolt Gun. This is another boomer shooter, but what's unique about it is it's set in the Warhammer universe. The first boomer shooter to be set in the Warhammer universe. And I would say, as far as boomer shooters go, it's got a great weapon selection. The enemies feel good to fight. They explode into gore when you kill them, which also feels good. You get to use the chainsword as a main weapon. That's fun. But overall, a lot of the levels, they don't really loop back on themselves cleanly, and sometimes it's difficult to figure out where to go. The last boss is a pain in the neck, and it's just an annoying kind of arena fight with the boss in the middle. So as far as boomer shooters go, I wouldn't even put it in the top 5. Ion Fury is way better. Cultic is way better. Amid Evil is way better. Heck, even Dread Templar is way better. I would not actually recommend this game. I know Warhammer has a huge following, and I think Warhammer is very cool. But Bolt Gun is a swing and a miss. Amnesia, The Bunker. I'm a big fan of the Amnesia series. I think the games are very, very good. They're scary, like the settings. And The Bunker, it set a new standard for the series. First of all, the setting is awesome. World War I. You're in the tunnels in World War I. They added guns to Amnesia, and they feel terrific. It has a really cool concept of the gameplay progression where you're dropped in the same bunker every time. The layout is the same, but the key items are randomized. So as you're trying to avoid the creature and get the key items you need, every run through the game is going to be slightly different. And I think that is such a smart idea for a horror game, because horror games are naturally replayable, in my opinion. And having it baked into the game where the key items are in randomized spots Each run is going to be an exciting experience, and that enhances the replay ability, and it's brilliant, and I am extremely impressed by Amnesia the Bunker. Highly, highly recommended. Need for Speed 2 on the PS1. Great graphics, great controls, fast cars, just a very solid racing game. If you want a retro racing experience that still feels good in our modern time, Need for Speed 2 is great. Need for Speed High Stakes. I'll be honest, I don't even remember playing this. I wrote it down. I definitely played through the arcade mode, but I don't remember it. I'm sure it was good. You know, the Need for Speed games on the PS1, they're all really good. They have great graphics. The controls feel good. If you're a Need for Speed aficionado, let me know in the comments what your favorite Need for Speed game is. Maybe it's this one. I'm sorry if I'm letting you down. I don't remember. It was probably good. If you're looking for a racing game on the PS1, I can just recommend any of the Need for Speed games. Need for Speed 3, Hot Pursuit on the PS1. Another great racing game. You know, same, everything that was said for Need for Speed 2, the great graphics, the responsive controls, applies for Need for Speed 3. They throw in the police into the mix in Hot Pursuit. You can play as the police in some of the modes, which is really fun. You can call in spike strips and roadblocks. It is a great game. I think it's my favorite Need for Speed, and I highly, highly recommend it. Ninja Shadow of Darkness. So this was a beat-em-up game on the PS1, interestingly made by the same company that made the classic Tomb Raider games, so that's pretty cool. Core Entertainment and Eidos Interactive. It was a good game. It was a long game, a lot of varied levels. There's really great variety. You start in a forest. There's some castle levels where you're fighting zombies. There's a lava, kind of volcano-ish level. A lot of bosses. Gameplay felt good. The hitboxes were good. That's really important with a beat-em-up type game. A lot of weapons to pick up. Also a challenging game. I died quite a bit. Had to restart a lot of levels. And it took me a while to beat the game. I had to persevere. But overall, it was really fun. Lesser known beat-em-up game on the PS1, I would recommend. BioFreaks on the PS1. I guarantee you have never played a fighting game like BioFreaks. It is heavily projectile based. It's set in a crazy dystopian future setting, but that's not the unique part about it. The unique part is it has almost fully 3D movement, and every character has the ability to hover with a jetpack. So it's a very mobile game with lots of projectiles flying. And on top of all of that, it has a limb removal system where you can blow off an enemy's left or right arm or left or right leg. And the buttons on the controller correspond to those different limbs. And if you press the button for a limb that has been blown off, you'll just wave your stump and squirt blood everywhere, which really tickles me coming from Mortal Kombat as a kid. The character design is terrific. There's like a cyborg clown with a mohawk that looks actually really cool. There's this guy, I think his name is Zipperhead. He's this like freakish looking mutant with a bunch of like spikes and weapons like coming out of his back. They're like embedded in his back. He's like shirtless and ripped. There's a robotic minotaur with a ball and chain for an arm, like a wrecking ball. It's a cool game. Nothing like it. I would recommend that you try it out. At least give it a shot. Play a couple levels in arcade mode. It'll be worth it. It's cool. BioFreaks is good. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. This is a tough one for me because I beat Breath of the Wild and I did like it overall, but I had some specific complaints about it that I think many people had. First complaint was the weapon durability system. I did not enjoy. And the second complaint was the dungeons sucked. They could barely even be called dungeons. They were so mediocre. And the third complaint is that the bosses also sucked. I had more fun fighting Hinoxes and Lionels. More fun fighting them than I had fighting any of the bosses in Breath of the Wild. So, what did Tears of the Kingdom do? Well, it arguably made weapon durability more of a problem because 99% of the weapons you find are decayed, and if you combine them with most common ingredients, it does not give them more durability than what the weapons had in Breath of the Wild. So that complaint is worse in Tears of the Kingdom. Okay, the second thing, the dungeons. Happy to report they are much better in Tears of the Kingdom. In fact, the Gerudo dungeon is terrific. It's very moody. I like how it has a central area that you branch off from and then return to multiple times. The music is great. I was completely engrossed in it. That was an excellent dungeon. Also, the Goron dungeon is really fun. It's intricate, kind of complicated, like mining dungeon where you're running these mine carts through it, and you have to find out. You have to modify the tracks so your cart can get through the dungeon. I loved it. I thought that was a really excellent dungeon, and I would put it pretty high on the list of overall Zelda dungeons. That's how good I thought that it was. So that was really, really good. The bosses, they were really, really easy, but they looked good. And I guess easy bosses in the 3D Zelda games is pretty typical. Ocarina of Time had really easy bosses. Majara's bosses are easy. I'd say Wind Waker's bosses are also pretty easy. So it's not out of the ordinary. So I more so look for creative designs, and they did a nice job with Tears of the Kingdom. So aside from all that, another thing that stands out with Tears of the Kingdom is the ability to build things. It's very, very fun making your own killer robot or making a hover bike, which I made and used to explore most of the depths to save a lot of time and also have a lot of fun. It's just fun flying a hover bike in a Zelda game. So that was really cool. And the ability to phase up through solid surfaces was also fun. It's a mechanic like that is really cool because you feel like you're breaking the game, but it's intentional. And whenever games designers come up with creative things like that, I'm guaranteed to enjoy it. Overall, I would give a recommend to Tears of the Kingdom. Zombie U PC version. This was actually a really fun game. First-person shooter melee game set in Britain, and it's actually kind of creepy. I like the setting. I like the missions that you have a safe house that's underground, and you like exit to the surface, and you have to do missions for this contact you have over the radio and work your way through the city and accomplish objectives. And it feels good. It's fun. The guns actually feel pretty darn good. The melee is impactful. You like whap a zombie with a cricket bat, and it feels good. And overall, I really liked it. It's a lesser known game at this point. I think it was a launch title on the Wii U. So, you're kind of destined for obscurity if that's one of your claims to fame. But overall, it was good, and a lesser known zombie first-person shooter that is definitely worth playing. Rot. So this is another boomer shooter, but it distinguishes itself with its unique setting. So this game has a setting of a communist Eastern Europe, and the graphics are mostly shades of brown, and it has Quake-style graphics, so it's a fully 3D boomer shooter. And it really sets a very specific mood with its appearance, the way its graphics look. The guns, your pistol's a CZ52, which I've never seen in any other shooter, so that was cool. You get that weird Soviet shotgun that pumps forward instead of back to cycle it, which is cool. You can get bottles of wine in your inventory to take swigs from to heal yourself. And it's more than the weapons and the items. The enemies in this game are completely unique. You fight horses that are wearing gas masks that are really creepy looking. And the whole game, it really has an oppressive, creepy mood to it. And it's absolutely terrific. The bosses are really creative looking. Their appearances are unique. And the last boss in particular, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just going to say it goes completely off the rails. You'll never expect what it's going to be. It's a ride, and it's awesome. It is one of my favorite boomer shooters that I've played, and I played the vast majority of the boomer shooters that have been released, and Fraught is with the very best of them. Highly recommend. Heretic. So we're going from talking about boomer shooters to actually playing a real deal, old school, first-person shooter. Heretic, it was created using the Doom engine, so it plays exactly like a Doom game. Imagine that. But what sets it apart is that it has a medieval setting. You're a sorcerer, so instead of using handguns and shotguns and rocket launchers and the BFG, you use magic. So you have a staff that shoots little magic projectiles. You have fire. Your shotgun is like this ethereal magical crossbow that shoots like a spread of green magical bolts out of it. It's a blast. If you want to play an actual boomer shooter from back in the day that still feels terrific in modern times, Heretic is an excellent game. Highly recommend it. Quake 2 64. So this was the, I'm not going to use the word port, the version of Quake 2 on the N64, you could maybe say. What I'm getting at is that Quake 2 on the Nintendo 64, it wasn't a simple downgraded port from the PC version. It was a whole new game. You know, the assets were similar. Of course, the monsters look like how they do on the PC version. The weapons do too. But the levels in Quake 2 64 are completely unique. And the music is also unique in that it's original for the Nintendo 64 version, and it was written by the same person that did the music for Doom 64. So what that means is instead of having the metal, like rock style music from Quake 2 on the PC, the 64 version has a creepy, moody, almost ambient soundtrack. And in my opinion, I greatly prefer it. Because, you know, the cyborg freaks you're fighting in Quake, the Strogg, they're horrifying. So I like the creepy tone the N64 version provides. Very much enjoyed it. If you get the Night Dive remaster of Quake 2, this is included in it, and I absolutely love it. I like the 64 version better than the original Quake 2. I know, yeah, that might upset some, but that really is how I feel. I love it. It's terrific. I cannot recommend it enough. Quake 2 64. Play it. Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo. This game is so difficult. Thank God I played it on the Switch Virtual Console where I could rewind. And also, I was playing it with my cousins, so we were able to pass the controller around when I was getting to the point that I wanted to jump out of a window because the game is so frustrating. But by some miracle, we beat it. And I could recommend to you the wonderful experience I had playing this game with my cousins, but that doesn't mean that I would actually recommend that somebody goes back and plays this game. But let's go ahead and talk about the next one. Donkey Kong Country 2. Now this is where it's at. Donkey Kong Country 1, you could skip it, but Donkey Kong Country 2, if you are a fan of side-scrolling platformers, this is one of the absolute best. First off, the opening is really, really cool. In Donkey Kong Country 1, you defeat K. Rool at the end, and Donkey Kong Country 2, it picks up immediately. You're in the wreckage of his ship on the coast of an island, which is a really cool way to start a game, especially back on the Super Nintendo. It's neat that the first game runs immediately into the second one. And Donkey Kong Country 2, it improves on literally everything from the original. The difficulty is more even. The hitboxes for your character are definitely better. There were some cheap deaths in Donkey Kong Country 1. It does not happen nearly as much in Donkey Kong Country 2. Playing as Dixie Kong is fun. You can use her hair like a helicopter to kind of hover and extend your jumps. The graphics look terrific. The music is terrific. I mean, come on, it's Donkey Kong Country. Everybody knows that. It is an awesome game. I loved every level. Highly, highly recommended. Dragon Ball Fighters. This is a fighting game made by Arc System Works of Guilty Gear fame, but you get to play as all your favorite nostalgic characters from Dragon Ball Z, which I grew up on Toonami, I grew up on Dragon Ball Z, I grew up on waiting 6 episodes for Goku to finally go Super Saiyan, I grew up on waiting 10 episodes for Trunks to finally arrive and slash Frieza to pieces. So playing this game as all my favorite DBZ characters, but with a well fleshed out fighting game system created by the absolute gangsters behind Guilty Gear, is a dream come true. Very, very thoroughly enjoyed playing this game, learning the different characters. The story mode, it's kind of boring, and it's way too long and drawn out. I just did it for the coins so I could buy extra colors for my dudes. But just jumping in this game and playing arcade mode, playing with a friend, is so much fun. Highly recommended. Stunt FX Racers. So this is a racing game on the Super Nintendo that I was bored one night and I saw it on the virtual Super Nintendo thingy that Nintendo has for your Switch Online service. So I fired it up and played through the arcade mode, and it was alright. I wouldn't recommend it. There are way better racing games on the Super Nintendo to play. I mean, you should play through F-Zero 10 times before you play this game once. So, not really recommended. Armored Core 6. So to put this into perspective, I am a massive Armored Core fan. I cut my teeth on Armored Core 2 when I got a PS2, and you know, when people think of From Software, they think of Souls, and don't get me wrong, I love me some Souls. I've beat them all. I even have the special edition of Demon Souls on the PS3, the one with the foil cover. So I'm invested in the Souls too, but when I think of From Software, and what I prefer from Software, and what I love from Software, is the Armored Core series. And it had been so long since they made an Armored Core game, I honestly never ever thought that I would ever see another Armored Core game. Especially with the popularity of Elden Ring and Dark Souls and Bloodborne. You know, why would they even make another Armored Core game? You know, like make the financial decision to make another Armored Core game. But by some miracle, From Software made Armored Core 6, and it is absolutely terrific. Great levels. Oh, the boss fights are sweet. Fighting the worm, come on, that's so cool with Rusty. Oh, come on. Yeah, limiter's released and shoots that laser. Oh my gosh, it's so good. The characters are awesome. Rusty, I just mentioned. My handler, Mr. Walter, that guy's the man. Cinder Carla. Snail, I hate Snail. All my homies hate Snail. Every single one of them hates Snail. The customization for your core, I mean, being able to rust out your core's parts is so cool. I did a shiny chrome core for my first run through with hot rod flames on it. Oh my gosh. Oh, I loved Armored Core 6. It's terrific, and it's in the running for my game of the year. I'm not going to tell you what my game of the year is until I'm done talking about all the games, but Armored Core 6 is amazing. Thank you, From Software, for making this. I loved it. Highly, highly recommend. If you've never played an Armored Core game, doesn't matter. Fire it up. If you're a Souls person, there's a lot of concepts that carry over to this game, and a lot of concepts from classic Armored Core that carried over into Souls. I mean, Armored Core is, you know, it has a lot of simulation RPG elements. I mean, you're building a mech, all the stats. I love it. Highly recommended. Armored Core Project Phantasma. So this is an Armored Core game on the PlayStation 1. One of the 3 that were on the PlayStation 1, and it's great. It's not a super long game, but it has some very creative levels. One that stands out to me is you need to kidnap a VIP, and he's at like this military base, and you come in through, you like take the long route through this forest, and you like sneak up on this base, and you corner him in a building, and you kill his escorts and capture him. And I thought that was just really cool, really great fun level. If you're an Armored Core fan, go back to the PS1 and play Project Phantasma. It's still, the controls still feel good to this day. Of course, it's not going to play like 6. It's going to have the old school control scheme with R1 and L1 for strafing, and then R2 and L2 to look up and down. But you get used to it after just a little bit of gameplay. You settle right in, and it's awesome. Highly recommend. Armored Core 9 Breaker. So this was the last Armored Core game, a new to me Armored Core game that I played this year. It's on the PS2, and it does not have any missions. It is only the arena, and it's kind of weird. There's a point system, and you jump into matches, and you defeat opponents, and you gain more and more points, and then you get the opportunity to fight newer and newer, stronger arena fighters, and you kind of move your way up the ranks. And it's all right. It's all right. If you've played every Armored Core game and you haven't played 9 Breaker, obviously play 9 Breaker, because you're into it and you want to get all the Armored Core experiences that you can. But if you're like a casual Armored Core fan, or you really like the mission part of it, or even if you enjoy the arena, that's all this game is arena. And after a while, it does get a little old, constantly grinding the same enemies out over and over again. I will say that it has a fairly robust searching system where you can kind of set up the parameters of what type of opponent you want to fight, and the game will like curate a list. Like, say you want to fight a bipedal heavy mech that uses missiles, you can put all those parameters in, and it will generate an opponent like that for you to fight. So that aspect of it is pretty cool. So I would give it a soft recommend. It is not a must play by any means, but it's decent. Blasphemous 2. I have some mixed feelings on this game. There are some ways that it improves on the original, like the fact that you can get 3 different weapons, so the combat feels a lot more varied and fresh as you switch between them for different situations. The bosses are not as soul-crushingly difficult. They feel a lot more fair, but they're still exciting. There's one boss in particular where you're fighting 2 knights at the same time, and one of them is like hopping around, and the other one is shooting fireballs, and that's really cool. There's another boss where it's a very, very agile female knight with like a rapier, and she's like balancing on these golden strings in the environment and hopping around and trying to slash you, like warping around. That was a really great boss fight, so I enjoyed that. But overall, I feel like the presentation was not as interesting as it was in the original Blasphemous. Like, the bosses in the original Blasphemous are like some of the all-time coolest designs I've ever seen in sprite artwork. That exhumed Pope was, oh my gosh, it was amazing. That horrifying giant baby monster, that's like the stuff that nightmares are made out of. Like, that game's designs were amazing. Blasphemous 2, most of the bosses are humanoid. So they're still fun to fight, but they just don't have that shock and awe of the original. I would give it a soft recommend. It's not the best Metroid-style game that I played this year, Metroidvania, if you will. And if you haven't played the actual Castlevanias that are in this Metroid style, Symphony of the Night, Circle of the Moon, or Eye of Sorrow, Harmony of Dissonance, Portrait of Ruin, Order of Ecclesia, you get the point. If you haven't played the actual true Castlevania games in this style, you need to play those first before you fire up Blasphemous 1 or 2. A Medieval's expansion, The Black Labyrinth. So I've been waiting for this expansion since A Medieval came out. How long has it been? 3 years at least? Maybe slightly longer? A Medieval is one of my favorite boomer shooters, and guess what? The Black Labyrinth is more of the same terrific gameplay. It has this gameplay mechanic where your melee fists are also used to alter the environment for platforming puzzles, and it's so intensely satisfying just punching a massive piece of rock and seeing it go careening across the level to create a new platform for you, or punching a piece in the wall and having it ricochet you across the level. It's really cool. Great weapons. If you're not aware, if you're not familiar with the medieval, it's very much like the Heretic game I mentioned a couple minutes ago, where you're not using firearms, you're using magical weapons or melee weapons, fighting medieval magical type monsters. And it has really colorful, stylish graphics. It's one of the best looking boomer shooters. I think its style is unmatched. And this expansion is more terrific gameplay. Highly, highly recommended. Death Trap Dungeon. Imagine classic Tomb Raider in a medieval steampunk dungeon setting with gory melee combat, and that is Death Trap Dungeon in a nutshell. This game was so fun. It has really satisfying combat with amazing gore. When you defeat an enemy, blood squirts everywhere, and any part of an enemy's body that you hit with your sword while they're dying just gets lopped off. As a matter of fact, I chopped an enemy's ear off, and I'm actually gonna put up a picture of it right now. I chopped an enemy's ear off, and it hit the ground and stayed there for the duration of the level, and this is on a PlayStation 1 game. Absolutely blew me away. You know, it's not without its faults. The game is very challenging, and at times it's just straight up unfair. There are lots of one-hit kill traps. I mean, it is the Death Trap Dungeon, but there are a lot of one-hit kill traps, and you aren't always able to anticipate them unless you're going very, very slow through the level and being extremely careful. You get used to it over time, and just the unique atmosphere, the really cool and fun levels, the completely unique setting. There's nothing like this, and it's the type of game that would only come out during the PlayStation 1 era, and I would highly, highly recommend it. Another cool thing about the game is it gives you a lot of tools, a lot of magic to cast, a lot of different weapons, and learn what works with what enemy, and it will make your path through the dungeon a lot easier. And I'll give you a hint: the poison sword, it doesn't cause poison damage, it does extra damage against poison enemies. That was a hard one for me to learn. But when I did, it was very helpful. So yeah, Death Trap Dungeon, I think you should definitely try it. I recommend it. Star Wars Demolition. Take Twisted Metal, give it a coat of Star Wars paint, and that's what this game is. A lot of fun characters to play as. You can unlock Darth Maul and do drive-bys with your lightsaber. That was pretty fun. Playing as Boba Fett, not in Slave 1. He's just floating, or he's hovering around with his jetpack and blasting people with his rifle and his rockets. This it was fun. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. You should play Twisted Metal 1 and 2 and Vigilante 8 1 and 2 before you throw in this Star Wars game, but I had a good time with it. Dead in the Water. I don't know how I came across this PlayStation 1 game. I think I found it on some YouTube video, but I am so happy that I did. Take Twisted Metal and mash it together with the water physics and feel of Wave Race on the N64, but make it speedboats instead of jet skis, and you'll have Dead in the Water. This is a racing game where you get weapons on your speedboats, missiles, grenades, and when they explode, they actually create physically simulated waves that you're bobbing through as you're racing through the levels. I loved this game. I've almost never heard anybody talk about this game. By some miracle, I just found it on some random YouTube video, and I am so happy that I did. And I hope that more people try it out because it's completely unique and it is extremely fun. I loved it. Huge recommend on Dead in the Water. Ion Fury Aftershock. So this is another boomer shooter, and it has the distinction of being made in the original Duke Nukem 3D engine. So it's cool that it's a new game made in a very old engine, and it plays silky smooth. In this Aftershock expansion, it added a whole new campaign. They added some new weapons, one of which was a gas grenade launcher that is really powerful. It shoots these grenades that release these green clouds of gas that are poison, and if you are facing any difficult enemy, just whap them with the gas grenade and it's over. It is extremely powerful, and it's very, very fun to use. Use the gas grenades. They also added a explosive flechette launcher that acts like the flak cannon from Unreal Tournament. Just think of it as a shotgun with bouncy pellets that also explode, and it is really, really fun to use also. And as if that wasn't enough, they also added a hover bike that you're able to use through most of the missions in the campaign. It's fast, it has auto-targeting explosive cannons, it's a power trip. It is extremely fun. It is pure fun. Very much enjoyed it. Highly recommend the original campaign of Ion Fury and also this Aftershock expansion. Lords of the Fallen. So this game is a Souls clone, and a very good one at that. Although some parts of it show that it is in fact a clone and not a true Souls game made by FromSoft. Examples of this would be that there's a lack of enemy variety, and there's also a lack of weapon movesets. Essentially, each weapon type only has one moveset. There's a large variety of weapon designs within all of these different categories, but within each category, all the weapons have the same set. So if you have two different short swords, they both swing identically. They look different, no different stats, but their moveset will be the same. But with that said, there's a lot to love about this game. The environments, they look terrific. Particularly a town that's on fire that you go to late in the game. It really, really looked cool. And they're very detailed. The bosses are unique, and many of them have creative designs. Particularly the final boss and another boss called the Hollow Crow that just looks, it's so creepy. Just wait till you see it. You're going to be impressed. It is a creepy looking, awesome boss. I really liked it. And there's even a boss called the Spurned Prodigy that I consider a better execution of the Ceaseless Discharge boss from Dark Souls 1. I know that doesn't sound like much of a compliment, but it really is a great boss, and I feel like the way that the Spurned Prodigy was when you fought it, if From Software would have designed Ceaseless Discharge like what they did in Lords of the Fallen, Ceaseless Discharge wouldn't be a meme boss. It would actually be considered pretty good. Aside from the great bosses and the mostly great-looking areas, it has a unique mechanic where you can phase between worlds to solve environmental puzzles and to save yourself from death. And I think it's implemented well, and it's a good idea. It sets it apart from other Souls clones, and it's a good mechanic. And the movesets, even though you only have one moveset for each weapon type, there are a lot of different moves within each set, and you can switch from one-handing your weapon to two-handing your weapon in the middle of your combo, which is such a great idea. I'm surprised that FromSoft didn't think of that themselves, so that impressed me. I thought that was really cool. Overall, I would definitely recommend Lords of the Fallen. Resident Evil Dead Aim. This is a strange one. It's a Resident Evil light gun shooter on the PS2. I do own a PS2 light gun, but I couldn't find it, and I was being lazy, so I played this whole game with a conventional controller instead, and it still ended up being really fun. The environments are cool. Mainly you're on a boat. It's like this big luxury cruise liner with all kinds of rooms and zombies strewn about, and it looks great. It's a fully 3D game. And then you go to like a military kind of complex later, which also looks really good. There's a good weapon variety. You get a couple different handguns, which I particularly enjoy. All of them have different stats, and they're fun to wield. And when you go to the save rooms in this game, you can refill your handgun ammo. So you can mess around and see which one you like the best. If you like the Beretta, or the Glock 18, or the suppressed Smith & Wesson autoloader. I don't know its name offhand because they're just numbers, and it's impossible for me to remember them. Sadly, the guns are not represented on the screen. What I mean is you don't see your character's hand holding them, which I wish would have been a thing. It would have been a nice enhancement to see their hand holding the gun and reloading. I really like that kind of stuff. And as a matter of fact, Capcom did that prior to this game. There was a Code Veronica first-person arcade game that had 3D gun models in first person, and if you've never seen it, you should look up footage on YouTube. It's a really cool game, or even get an ISO and try it yourself. It only released in Japan, but it's not hard to emulate and try out. It's fun. It's really fun. I haven't beat all of that one yet, but I've beat probably 5 or 6 levels. Anyway, back to Dead Aim. Overall, I definitely would recommend Resident Evil Dead Aim. It's a fun piece of Resident Evil history. Like Capcom, they used to do all kinds of weird experimental stuff with Resident Evil, like off the wall goofball stuff, and more often than not it landed, and Dead Aim is an example of that. I enjoyed the gameplay even though I was using a controller, and with a light gun it probably would have been amazing. So it's great, and it's not particularly long, and the voice acting is horrible in the best way. It is absolutely hilarious. It's probably the worst voice acting of any Resident Evil game. It blows Resident Evil 1 out of the water. It's so bad. It's a riot. It's great. Play Dead Aim. RoboCop Rogue City. Dead or alive, you're coming with me. This game is pure fun. It plays like Deus Ex, so the loop is you like explore a small sandbox kind of area and accomplish side missions, whatever side missions you want to do, and then you move on to the main mission when you're ready to progress the story forward. It has RPG elements too, where you can spec RoboCop out however you'd like. I myself lean towards extra armor because there's nothing like the feeling of being a walking tank and just goring scumbags with RoboCop's pistol. So fun. The environments, it's got light destruction where you can like shoot the drywall off the walls and smoke just blasts into the air, and it looks amazing while you're playing. It's just pure fun. The game, it's terrific. They even got Peter Weller, the original RoboCop, to come back and do all of RoboCop's voice lines. The dialogue is faithful to the movies, and it is extremely well written. It's always a treat listening to Peter do his RoboCop. And it just makes me really happy to play a high-quality RoboCop game, and hopefully it inspires people to watch the original movie, which is an all-time classic. Extremely high recommendation for this game. I consider it an all-time must-play. I loved RoboCop Rogue City. Tenchu Stealth Assassins. The original stealthy ninja game. There were ninja games before Tenchu, but none of them feel like Tenchu. Brutal stealth kills with spraying blood, more than a dozen tools to use and gain the upper hand on your enemy. The tools are so fun that I have a hard time picking my favorite. I like the poison rice balls. You can give them to your enemies and they get sick and you get easy stealth kills. It almost feels like cheating, and I think that's the point. You're a ninja. It's not supposed to be fair to your enemies, right? I like the caltrops, and you can toss them on the ground and slow your pursuers down when they step on them and get them stuck in their foot. Which makes me cringe to think about. Oh, of course, the best item is probably the grappling hook. Being able to toss it and zip up to a rooftop or the side of a mountain. The vertical traversal in Tenchu, like the first time you toss the grappling hook and zip up onto something, just blows you away. It was amazing. It must have been amazing for the time. This is my first time beating Tenchu. This whole list obviously are new games to me, and I couldn't even imagine back when this game originally released. I bet that blew people away. And after all that, using all your items, being as stealthy as possible, if you do get discovered, you do have the option of outright fighting. And Tenchu has surprisingly detailed combat system. Lots of moves. You can flip over your enemies, you can strafe, you can roll. There are different sword swings. You can swing to your left, your right. You can do a thrusting stab move that advances you forward. The combat, what I'm trying to say is the combat is great. It's heavy. It feels like it has weight to it. You know, when you land a strike on the enemy, the sound effects sound great. When you block strikes, dust flies up, sparks fly off your blade, and you're slid backwards. It just looks cool. You know, the visuals, they engross you. And the hitboxes are so precise that they rival modern games, and I kid you not, in a lot of ways, they're better than modern games. I enjoyed it so much that I actually made a showcase on Tenchu's combat titled Tenchu Has the Best Combat on the PS1. You should look it up on my channel if you're interested. And I truly believe that title. I wasn't being hyperbolic. The combat in this game is amazing. So it has great stealth and traversal and great combat if you get seen. It's terrific. You know, while I was playing Tenchu, time just flew by. I'd knock out multiple levels in a single session, and that's one of the highest compliments I can give a game. I wasn't constantly checking game facts to see, oh, when is this going to be done? I was just having a blast, and the minutes flew by. Tenchu is an all-time classic, and I give it a must-play recommendation. Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion Remastered. I am a huge Turok fan. It was a massive part of my childhood playing 1, 2, and 3 on the N64. And Night Dive remastering Turok 3 that previously was only on the N64. No PC version of Turok 3 ever made, unlike 1 and 2. Them remastering it to modern specs to run silky smooth on the PC and have modern lighting is something that I thought I'd never see. And it brings me so much joy to actually play it. But the great remastering aside, how is the actual game of Turok 3? It is the best of the trilogy. There is nothing like Turok 3. The campaign is short, but there are 2 heroes you can play as, Joseph and Danielle. And much like Resident Evil 2, who you decide to play as will change your progression through the campaign. And, more importantly, to me, the 2 characters get completely different weapon upgrades. Those upgrades alone make it worth it to replay the campaign as the opposite character. So fun finding out which weapons Danielle gets, which weapons Joseph gets, and a major shout out to Joseph's Shredder shotgun. Its pellets, they bounce off walls, and if it doesn't kill the enemy outright, it electrocutes them so you can finish them off with a gory follow-up shot, which is so fun. My favorite Turok game, remastered by the wizards at Night Dive, Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion Remastered, is an absolute must-play. I loved it. The Last Faith. Another Castle Troid-style indie game, similar to Blasphemous. This one's set apart by its graphical style. It looks like a pixel art Bloodborne. It's got great weapon variety, with weapons that are just plain cool. One that comes to mind is the Ice Axe. Its special move lets you break it apart into 2 axes and start swinging them like a blender, blasting ice chunks all over the screen. It's pretty stunning. It's got a good level variety with a consistent tone. Mostly Gothic cities with a castle, and there's neighboring swamplands. There's even an icy town late in the game. You know, it stays to a consistent Gothic horror theme, and I can appreciate it staying true to that. The bosses are decent. Many of them are like beastly bat-style creatures. It kind of gets a little old seeing that type of monster more than once. But there are some standouts. The last boss in particular looks great. There's a dual boss, so you fight 2 creatures at the same time. They look really cool. I enjoyed that fight in particular. One of them is slow and powerful, and the other one is like jumping around fast, like shooting fireballs, and you have to figure out how to dodge them simultaneously and get your hits in, and that's a really excellent boss fight. I really like that one a lot. But the regular enemy variety is lacking. That's where the like indie status of this game starts to show. I think that's kind of a theme with indie games, whether they're Dark Souls clones or Castlevania clones. They don't have the enemy variety of the real deal. So you'll see the same crop of enemies frequently throughout the game in different zones in the game. The zones will look different, but you'll still see the same monsters. There's probably around at least 20 different monsters. Don't let me make you think that there's only like, there's only like 3 monsters you fight throughout the game. No, there's decent variety, but when you compare it to a real Castlevania game where it almost feels like every 2 screens you fight a brand new enemy type. I mean, those games they're packed with monsters. It's really amazing. This game is not on that level. Even though the enemy variety is a little slim, the enemies themselves are still really fun to fight because the game has a great weapon selection, has really creative weapons. They look really cool. They all have different movesets. They're all fun to use, and it gives you a lot of great combat tools. Speaking of the combat, Last Faith has a conventional leveling system where you can pick which stats you want to increase and create a build for yourself, which I love. For me, that greatly increased replayability because on my first run, I was a greatsword wielding strength Chad. I was looking forward to being a big brain wizard on my next run, and then maybe after that, I'll do a gunslinging whipcracker build. But you get my point. It's fun building a character, at least to me it is. I would go so far to say that I recommend The Last Faith before Blasphemous 1 or 2. I would play this before that for sure. I had way more fun with The Last Faith. But just like Blasphemous, you should play the actual Castlevania Castle Troids first. All of them. I would recommend all of them before The Last Faith. And then play The Last Faith, because I give it a strong recommend. I very much enjoyed it. That was a lot of games. Most of them were good. A lot of them were great. A couple of them sucked. What was my game of the year, though? Well, it comes down to 3 games. Allow me to explain. The first game is Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion Remastered. This is my favorite Turok, but the true reason why it's in the running is because of what Night Dive did. They took a game that was previously only on the Nintendo 64 and were somehow able to remaster it fully, adding new content, modern graphical touches, and it is an incredible work. Because of this, the possibilities it opens up for other Nintendo 64 remasters are limitless. Can anyone say Hybrid Heaven, or Jet Force Gemini, or Blast Core? Come on, just the possibility gets me so excited. The next game in the running is Armored Core 6. From Software revived a series that had been dead for more than a decade, with a sequel that incorporates the gameplay style of the classic games and melds it together with the fast pace of AC4. And it feels amazing. Great build variety, bare-knuckle melee moves with your mech, huge bosses, the classic Armored Core necessity to change your build to tackle individual missions, feeling like a futuristic, ironclad mercenary. It's everything I could have wanted from an Armored Core sequel. The last game in the running is Resident Evil 4 Remake. Capcom translated a classic game to a modern engine, preserved its core, added new gameplay variety, cut out some of the fluff, and made it distinct enough that the original is still a worthwhile experience to play. The castle section in Resident Evil 4 Remake is my favorite environment Capcom has ever made. And the new melee moves, being able to turn enemies around and then run up behind them and stab them in the neck for an instant kill, never ever gets old. The parrying mechanic is a great addition. The weapons feel amazing. Resident Evil 4 Remake is a great game. With all that said, I'm going to give my Game of the Year award to Armored Core 6. An entire gaming franchise was awoken from a 10-year slumber, and it came back with a vengeance. Top-shelf mech customization, top-shelf levels, top-shelf bosses, top shelf music. I didn't even touch on the music actually earlier in the video. Look up the track Verification. It is a banger of a track, and the whole game is packed with awesome music. AC6 is truly my game of the year. You do not want to miss it. And I hope you enjoyed hearing about all the games I played this year. It was a great mix of new and old across a variety of genres, and I had so much fun making this video, talking all about them. I'd love it if you told me about your favorite games this year in the comments. Give me some suggestions. You'd be surprised, there's still games, retro games that I still haven't played yet. I have a couple on the docket for this next year. I'm going to play Tales of the Abyss finally on the PS2. I've been meaning to play that for years. So I'd love to hear about your recommendations and what you played. And of course, I'll be back soon with another Let's Cheat. I'm planning on playing GoldenEye, and I think I have a great idea for what cheat codes I'm going to do. I think it's going to be a really entertaining video, so look forward to that. I'll see you soon, Game Sharks.